Is something as basic as expectations of conduct. We have a listing of, I believe there are 10, I don't like the word rules, so I'll put that word in quotes, rules or behavioral expectations that we ask of everyone, including ourselves, during this process. Things such as we don't interrupt. We talk about ourselves. Here's what I'm willing to do, as opposed to you need to go get a job or you need to do more for our children. Here's what I'm willing to do, and a variety of things. It's interesting to me to observe how some people can honor those and some people try to push them aside. And it's an indicator often of their communication in the marriage. So part of my job is to work with them throughout, to have these behavioral expectations almost become their norm for how they're going to work together as co-parents. And I keep that as part of my focus in every interaction I have with them. All the time. Well, he needs to take a minute, come back. Talk about what you're willing to do. Or it sounds like you have a request to make of him. Talk about what that request is and explain to him why you're making that request. And then let's let him have some time to think about that request. Those little subtleties can make a huge difference in how folks communicate, not only in these meetings, but how they go home and communicate in front of their children and with their children. Secondly, the impact on families is I really believe, very much so, I believe that there is an impact in what we do that shows up on many levels. That impact, I call it the impact chart, and I use it often when I train. And that impact begins first with how I handle myself. How do I take care of myself? Am I authentic in my communication in the world? I then move into a collaborative team. How do I communicate with the team of professionals and, for that matter, with the clients in the room? That team and the way we interact with one another impacts the clients that sit with us at the table and in that space that we share together. We're modeling for them all the time and impacting them all the time. They, in turn, take what they've experienced home to their children, and it impacts their children. And that, in turn, impacts future generations and the world. There's so much that's important to remember about this. And one of the things that I also like to do is collect little sayings and expressions. And when I'm working with the clients in my office, because in this model we work with them together, and I'm working with them on co-parenting skills and developing a healthy parenting plan, I will sometimes just pull out an expression and I'll just put it in front of both of them and not say a word. And I love to see how people react to that. And I'll usually do it when they're in the middle of having some conflict. I'll just stand up, go get something, put it in front of them. So a couple that I'll share with you, just randomly to share thoughts about working with conflict, is one recent one I've used is the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. That's a Chinese proverb. The second one I really like, that I use a lot lately with couples in conflict, you cannot talk yourself out of a problem that you have behaved yourself into. But you can behave yourself out of it. And that's by someone we all know, Mr. Covey, right? One of his expressions. So again, I like to look for these little ways when I work with couples in conflict. I try to look for creative ways to help them step back from themselves and step back from the intensity of the moment and their emotions, their husband-wife emotions, and be able to take a breath and maybe go into another space and place, figuratively, to say, wait a minute, as opposed to focusing on what you're doing wrong. What's my part in this? What can I do right now to create a different relationship with you? That's probably, for me, the theme of the co-parenting work I do with couples in the collaborative process when I work with them in my office, separate from the legal settlement meetings. I say to them from day one, I understand you have many negative emotions and interactions as a husband and wife, or we would not be sitting here today. Understand, you're choosing to get a divorce. But starting today, you begin creating a brand new relationship. And that relationship is called, how do we co-parent in an effective, healthy way from two different houses? I know how we parent together in the same house. I know how we do husband and wife relationship. I know how we do friendship or how we don't do those things. I know how we do them. But today, I get to create something brand new with you and every day going forward. So what I want to work with both of you on from today forward is how you can take all your past experiences, put them over here. We're not going to ignore them. They're going to be right here. They're part of you. But you let you be present to create something new starting today. And that new can look and feel different if you choose to be different starting today in some subtle ways. If we can look for some new ways to communicate with each other. Because your children need you to do this. They need you to be on the same team as parents. In fact, they need desperately for you to do that. And so as we work together, I'm going to remind you and challenge you all the time about the difference between your interactions as husband and wife who are divorcing versus interacting in a new, healthier co-parenting relationship. You may get tired of hearing me say it for the next few months, but that's going to be the broken record from Linda. Is that husband and wife talking to one another, or is that the co-parenting relationship talking and interacting? I found that something that simple, and it is a pretty simple concept that I think all of us know, but saying something that simple and setting it up as the foundation tends to be helpful when couples get in the midst of their negative emotion. That I can ask them to take a breath and ask them to check in if that's wife talking to husband or if that's mom talking to the other person in the world that knows the children best and loves the children most. Often that can ground people and they can take a breath and shift from one to the other. Not always, but often. When it does not, I'm grateful that I have a background and years of experience as a mental health professional to help have some other tools and skills on board to suggest to the team or help folks move through this process with some dignity. That's another piece that we talk about a lot. And actually not just we here in North Texas, anywhere that I've been on this planet, I tend to hear that word with the different groups that I've trained and met with and talked with, the different professionals, is how do we help folks go through this with some dignity? Because many people going through this process have so much anxiety that although they want to retain some dignity, they lose sight of it. And so I believe that's another piece of our work as collaborative teams, to create a container, some ground rules, some ways of interacting with them to help them maintain some dignity throughout this. So when they look back, they don't feel shameful around their behavior, that they feel proud of some of the things they did and said right in the middle of divorce. Huge difference, by the way, between collaborative and litigation right there, in my opinion, if we're going to generalize. That in collaborative, they have the potential, and I've seen it over and over and over, to look back and feel proud of the choices they made and the way they handled themselves. In litigation, in my years as a therapist, I've seen and heard over and over and over. They look back and they are ashamed or embarrassed around things they said or did. It's not quite that simple. We don't have quite those perfect little boxes. But if I were to speak to one of the differences, that would be one.